Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. You're here with Jeffrey Freed, author of Right Brain Children in a Left Brain World, and a world-class individual and educational consultant for those especially dealing with autism. Definitely ADHD and other things as well, both from children to adulthood. And then I am Kirk Patrick Miller. I also do educational consulting. So we wanted to talk today about impulse control. And that's such a huge, for me, this would have been very helpful for me to listen to when I was younger because I had absolutely zero impulse control. So, for me, definitely for ADHD, it was one of the impulsivity was one of the symptoms they listed. And I remember that because I had a long discussion with a therapist and my parents about it when I was really young. So, Jeffrey, I mean, impulsivity is found in so many different areas, but absolutely on those in the spectrum, absolutely for ADHD. Um, can you go into maybe talking a little bit about it so those listening that aren't sure what we're talking about, everybody knows what impulsivity is, but some of the things that you see, and maybe some examples.
Sure, I can try. I do know that impulse control is huge amongst the people that I work with, who are all non-neurotypical visual spatial learners, and virtually all of them are on the autistic spectrum. And the way I look at it is different from other people. For people who've listened to the rest of the podcast, they may be familiar with it, but maybe not. So my theory and my hypothesis is that the people that I work with, the bright visual spatial learners, the folks on the spectrum, have every sense that everyone else does, only more so. That's a Temple Grandin quote, and I thoroughly and completely believe it. These are people, my people, who, when they're sad, they're very sad. When they're happy, they're very happy. When they see something they want, their enthusiasm overrides everything else, and they go for it. So impulse control is, in my way of looking at it, is just basically a thing where strong impulse more powerful than a neurotypical's impulses, and it overrides logic and the ability to see the consequences. Now, what's interesting about that is that right brain visual spatial people do have the ability to visualize consequences. They just don't, most of them just don't do it. They live in the moment, which can make them very attractive as a friend or whatever, because when they do something, they pour their whole hearts, souls into it, and a lot of enthusiasm. However, that enthusiasm can be so intense that it overruns. They live in the moment.
The
And
risk.
yeah, and the risk too. A lot of people with ADD love impulsivity because it leads to some spectacular experiences. And yeah, there's consequences, but it's kind of hard to visualize those consequences. Um, so I mean, it's like if you take 1,000 people and 500 of them are neurotypical people. Um, I think amongst those 500 people, you'll have far less in the way of inhibition. They won't do stuff because they naturally think in steps, naturally think sequentially, and they immediately, upon perceiving doing something that might be a bit risky, they go right to consequences. It's kind of a sequential way of dealing with it. Whereas the 500 people who are on the spectrum, or who are very visual spatial but have powerful sensorial stuff going on, for them, they live in the moment. Their impulses are stronger, and they have a tendency, because they don't think sequentially or in steps, to live in the moment and to be damned with the consequences. Things will work out. That's a
That
huge difference. And nowadays we have many more people that are to the right on the spectrum in terms of learning styles. They're visual, they're spatial, they tend to be impulsive. It's just more, there are more people coming out processing in this non-neurotypical way than there used to be. Lots of reasons for that, but A lot of it's just a response to our environment, which is not very linear. Our environment is chaotic in a lot of senses. There's so much out there to process. News things come at you, music comes at you, friends come at you. Everything is a cacophony, a sensorial bombardment. And when you have that going on, you tend to sequence less. You live more in the moment, and you don't want to miss anything. So that's my take on it, and it is different from most people's, Kirk.
No, I like that. I think that the fact that there's just more people that are neurodiverse, and it's not a small amount. I'm noticing a massive amount just through social media. And I'm not talking about in terms of like specific individual accounts or anything like that. I'm talking about the way people talk and how many of them are being upfront and forward with what they deal with. And we also know scientifically as well. So because you're getting more people that are neurodivergent, neurodiverse, whatever people want to use or what term, I do think you're seeing a rise in individuals that do need help with impulse control. And this is not a topic that you hear about in schools because they don't have time. They got to follow the curriculum. And this is getting out of the teachers. For me, the perfect example I have is I remember I'd been practicing a whole day to just ride my bike across and hit this jump when I was little. So I was just started riding my bike, maybe 6, 7 years old. And my mom got home and I was so excited and I saw her and I was just like, Mom, look. And I went across the road. Well, I didn't even look. There's just the only thing that I really saw was my mom. And then I felt this huge desire to share. I wanted her to see this thing that I'd done all day long. Well, of course, a car was taking the corner really fast, almost hit me. That led to a very bad experience for my mom because she ran over to make sure I was okay. And as a good parent, she said, "Don't, you got to look both ways." Well, I was so upset because her focus wasn't on anything else. Plus, it hadn't gone well, right? If a car's flying at you, the jump's not going to go so well. So it was devastating. And I had that kind of an issue with more things than just, that. You described it really well. It was a lack or inability to see, okay, this could come off really badly. And it was very detrimental to me in a lot of ways. So injuries, I would leap over like, oh, I can make that jump. And I take this huge risk that nobody else was doing without thought. And I'd smash or sprain my ankle. I was in the hospital constantly. So from a physical standpoint, it wasn't that I was clumsy or anything. The risks that I was taking were very dangerous. And so the impulse control was something I was never taught. And it wasn't really talked about either when, even once I was diagnosed with ADHD, they said, okay, you're going to have impulsivity. And we're like, okay, what does that even mean? I mean, and so there weren't like tools. And now we go, okay, well, let's take a breath. Let's start learning and teaching, how to process what the outcome is. Picture what is the outcome going to be before you do something, or think about what you say before you just, spit it out. I think we all know that it's definitely lessened. I think there's less people that think about what they say with the internet. Social media makes that very easy, but it's such an important skill and it helps develop. And that's something you taught me when I was younger, was to kind of take a deep breath, think about what I was going to say, before I said stuff. It got me in trouble with teachers. I would often comment, back, or definitely do silly things to get attention, because I would seek attention. So by doing something really crazy and spontaneous and impulsive, it tended to get attention. So all of those things that you mentioned ring true with me. And I know it's actually very difficult to control. It was for me. I feel like I'm much better now, almost to the extreme side. I've almost gone to the opposite side where I'm too cautious. I don't know how I got there either, but your help, some of what I mean, besides what I just asked or what I just mentioned that you had taught me, what are some things that you found to be effective, at least for yourself or anybody else that you like?
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna answer that. The main thing that I've been teaching the students that I work with is before you act, like if you're very angry, if you're very enthusiastic, if you're mad at someone, I say to the person, you have a wonderful ability to visualize, hold images for a long period of time. Let's use it. Because it's such a great strength. All I'm asking you to do, I would say to them, is to think about what might happen if you say or do what you said you're gonna do. And just take a second, that's all it takes. Your brain moves very quickly, and anticipate what might happen if you say or do what you're about to do. Anticipate the negative, the downside, what it may cost you, and then simply decide, is it worth it to say or do it? I also tell them that, yeah, you may anticipate what could happen, and you may be wrong. But what happens is that you are glimpsing, you're getting a little preview of coming attractions as to what may occur. And then you just say, this is going to cost me something because everything that we do has side effects. Is it worth it? And then decide whether to do it or not. If you do it and you get nailed, something bad happens as a consequence, you got no kick coming because you've already anticipated what may happen if you say or do what you said you're going to do. And then, so you're covered on two aspects. You can't be surprised if something negative happens as a result of your impulsivity because you've previewed it and you've accepted it as part of the consequence. If you don't say it, you're probably going to be glad, or it's at least going to hold the peace a little bit longer. So what that does is it tends to put the person with impulsivity in a more controlled situation. They have control over the consequences, minimally perhaps, but they still do, and that changes everything. Instead of being a constant victim of things that you do that get you into trouble, well, you have more control. You're more of a perpetrator. You've anticipated the result, the possible result, and decided you want to live with it. So stop whining, stop complaining. You knew that there was a negative side to this as a possibility, and you did it anyway. That helps people a lot.
I can see why. Oh my
Well,
goodness, that's
the thing that's nice about it is there's one technique which just says count to 10. That's better than nothing. But this is better than that because you're using the counting to 10, the time element, time component, as seeing what might happen. And that usually precludes you doing it.
well,
You
and it
mentioned
plays
something
to their
really,
strength too. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, that's true. That's true. When you said something about being very, very, or much more conservative about taking risks now, there are a lot of people on the spectrum who are afraid to take any risks because it changes the paradigm, takes them out of their schemata and makes them more vulnerable. So in essence, what you want to do is you want to walk the fine line. You can be spontaneous and with words and with actions, but always begin to look at the possible consequences. There's no way you lose on that deal. I
No, I
like,
like that.
yeah, I like
It,
it too. It works.
my favorite part about it was the removal of anxiety from an unexpected surprise, because that is
Perfect.
something that is so difficult for hypersensitive individuals and those that are neurodiverse like myself. If something unexpected comes my way, it really throws me off. And that
Yes.
just heightens the anxiety. So when you think through it, counting to 10 buys you time. It doesn't, the playing to the strength of the individual that can really process and visualize is really an intelligent way to go. I kind of want to leave it there, because if somebody does picture, I don't think I can give better advice than that. That's a great technique to advise any individual. And by the way, you don't have to be neurodiverse to use that technique. If you are linear and sequential, you can still use that technique. Think about exactly what the consequence. You probably get there really fast too, or already know it maybe. But for people like myself, the impulsivity was not helpful. It was detrimental in things from school to relationships. And so you want to try to sidestep that. Jeffrey, I thought that was phenomenal. The only thing I wanted to add was that we kind of talk about the images, and I do want to say there is legitimate scientific proof that those on the spectrum are processing more images per second, which I think is really interesting when we talk about some of this stuff. So when we talk about that you can process fast, there's actually legitimate proof for this. So we want to play to the strengths of the individual, and I love that advice. So if you're dealing with impulsivity, that I can't give something better than that. I myself always, you can combine the breathing technique with that. I think we should close it out there. Do you have any final statements?
No, I can live with what we just said for sure.
Well, I think you were much more eloquent. My tongue was all twisted tonight. So I hope everybody has a beautiful week. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Please let us know what we can talk about that would help you. The tips that and some of the requests we've had have been really helpful. So we want to provide the best information we can. And tune in every Thursday. Have a beautiful week and weekend ahead. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know, and definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.